Let's look first at my contention that there's no good reason to think atheism is true. In response to the argument from evil, I pointed out that Dr. Drange himself admits that if God has an overriding desire, then his argument is fallacious. And I said he does have an overriding desire, namely his desire that people would freely come to love and believe in him. And maybe it's only in a world in which there is gratuitous, natural, and moral suffering that the maximum number of people would freely come to believe in God. And he said in response, but mine is just a probabilistic inference. Right, I understand that. And I'm suggesting that my hypothesis is in no way improbable, that on the contrary, it's actually supported by the demographics of world history and contemporary missiology, that very often it is in the context of suffering that people come to know and believe in God. And God's purposes in human history are being achieved. So given that overriding desire, I just don't see any teeth to the problem of evil argument. What about the argument from non-belief? I argued here that God can't make people freely believe in the truth of the gospel message, and that secondly, even if he could, that God can't guarantee that everyone who believes in the truth of the gospel message would respond to it in the proper way and believe and love him. And that given God's inability to do that, to guarantee that, it may well be that in this world, God does bring it about that those who would believe in the truth of the gospel message and place their trust and faith in him do in fact do so. And what Dr. Drange responded was simply by giving us more motivations for God to make people believe in the truth of the gospel message. For example, that people might go to hell, that they need to learn about his existence and so forth. I admit all of that God could be motivated to do that. But the point is that Dr. Drange has failed to show that there are any people in the world who would respond affirmatively to the existence of God if they had sufficient evidence, who don't have such evidence. I'm suggesting that God is in his providence and omniscience is capable of so ordering the world as to achieve an optimal balance between belief and unbelief in the world. And Dr. Drange is just purely speculating when he says that in a world of free creatures, God could have guaranteed a better balance between belief and unbelief than the balance that exists in the actual world. How does he know that? It's just pure speculation. So I see, again, just no validity to this argument from non-belief. In fact, I must say, in a sense, this argument is, with all due respect, almost a joke. It's the ultimate in buck passing. It's saying that God is the one who's responsible for the fact that so many people don't believe in him. Really, the responsibility lies with us. God's existence, I think, is evident in nature and conscience all around us. And it's the ultimate passing of the buck to say, well, now we're going to blame God for why we don't believe in him. In fact, this argument, if it were valid, would be a means of making sure God doesn't exist. We'll all conspire together not to believe in God, and then he can't exist, based on the argument from non-belief. So I just don't see any validity to it. Now, what about the reasons to think that theism is true? First, God makes sense of the origin of the universe. Dr. Drange says, but the biblical God is temporal. Well, two responses. Number one, many of those passages could simply be anthropomorphisms, that is, describing God in human terms, storytelling terms. Secondly, the theist could maintain that with the creation of the universe, God enters into time in order to sustain temporal relations with his creatures. Dr. Drange says, but what is it to cause something? A cause must exist before its effect. That's false. There's such a thing as simultaneous causation. For example, a heavy ball causing a depression in a cushion by resting on the cushion. Even if the ball and the cushion had been in that state from eternity past, the ball would still be the cause of the depression. A cause can be simultaneous with its effect. God's causing the universe is simultaneous with the moment of the Big Bang. He then said it's not true, contrary to what Professor Christopher Isham says, that these vacuum fluctuation models are passé. And he said that the field of cosmology is rapidly growing. Well, that's certainly a truism. But if he's going to oppose some other model to the standard Big Bang model, I want to know what it is, and I will then offer some refutation of it. But so far, he's just spoken in generalities. The fact is that vacuum fluctuation models don't work because of the problem that I described in my last speech. And notice, on the atheistic view, there isn't any explanation for the origin of the universe, why something exists rather than nothing. It's just a brute fact that the universe popped into being, uncaused out of nothing 15 billion years ago. To me, that is just incredible. Secondly, I said that God makes sense of the complex order of the universe. Here, Dr. Drange says your explanation of intelligent design is too obscure. Not at all. When you're walking in the field or on a beach and you find a watch lying on the beach, you don't say, "Oh, look how the elements have come together by chance to form this device." You immediately recognize the presence of intelligent design. And the same complexity present in the watch is present in the fine-tuning of the universe. He says, but there could be a theory of everything in which everything is explained. That, friends, is a pipe dream. There is no probability that exists today that such a theory will ever be discovered. And even if there were some sort of theory of everything, it would still require certain initial conditions, boundary conditions of the universe, that would be unexplained and would need to be put in by hand. He said, well, maybe there could be other conditions that would give rise to other forms of life. Well, I don't think so when you understand what the fine-tuning involves. If the universe had just a different expansion parameter, it would have recollapsed into a singularity in which no life could exist. Or it would have expanded too fast and been frozen so that it would be too cold for life. Or there wouldn't have been any chemistry. Or there wouldn't have been any atoms to form life. The point is that even if mind could exist, there could be no physical carbon-based intelligent life in a universe in which these parameters were altered in the slightest bit. We live on a knife's edge of incomprehensible fineness, which I think suggests intelligent fine-tuning. Dr. Drange said, well, maybe there's many worlds and we're just one of many universes. Let me point out three things about this. Number one, that is a metaphysical hypothesis which is every bit as speculative as theism is, and therefore enjoys no advantage over theism. In fact, I think theism is simpler than this bloated ontology of the many worlds hypothesis, and is therefore to be preferred. Secondly, there is no known mechanism that would generate such a world ensemble, and any mechanism for generating it would itself require fine-tuning in order to get the many worlds. And finally, number three, there is no independent evidence apart from the existence of intelligent life for the existence of these many worlds, whereas we have many independent reasons for believing in God, and it is the cumulative case that I believe makes the existence of God so plausible. What about objective moral values in the world? Dr. Drange says, well, maybe our moral feelings are based on genetic and social factors. That is absolutely correct on the atheistic view. It's just social and genetic conditioning. It's the herd morality. But I ask you, do you believe that the rape and torture of a little child is not objectively morally wrong? That the psychopath who does that is just acting antisocially or against his genes? I don't think so. I think that we have a moral intuition that it is morally better to love and nurture a child than to torture it and abuse it. And if you share those intuitions with me, then I think you'll agree that God exists. There was no refutation offered in the last speech of the evidence for the resurrection of Jesus, nor of the immediate experience of God in our lives today. So I think we have powerful cumulative evidence for believing that God does in fact exist.